All right, everyone, we're going to start this meeting. We are going to have a roll call of the current board members.
Fahey? No. Frisch? No. Olson, yes. Hoffman, yes. Levin, yes.
Miller.
Larry, Levin, yes. Miller, yes.
Thank you. We're just going to review the minutes of the last meeting. The regular meeting scheduled April 14th. We need a motion to accept those.
Second. Motion to accept.
Second, Renee.
Yeah, there's the ring.
Any comments, changes, questions of those minutes? All in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And review the executive session minutes for the same date, April 14th.
Make a motion to accept those minutes.
Second.
Yes. After review, do you guys have any questions, comments, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We need these executive minutes, session minutes turned in. We thank you. We have a guest this evening, Terry Liston, who is our corporate counsel of Morton Grove. She is here, first of all, to swear in our newest members of the board. So, take it away.
Ready to do that?
Yeah, we'll get them started.
All right. I've been presented with official oaths in alphabetical order, so let's start with Mark Albers. Raise your right hand, please. Mark. There's a typo in it.
Oh.
Fix that for official.
Sorry.
Repeat after me, please. I, Mark Albers,
I, Mark
do
Albers,
solemnly swear or
do
affirm
solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
and that I will faithfully discharge all of the duties of the Office of Library Trustee of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the Office of Library Trustee of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Why don't you sign them? And then will you turn them in to the president?
Sure.
And I'd like to swear in Mr. Berg right now. Oh, I'm gonna be happy, so you can raise your right hand, please. So far, so good. Repeat after me. I, Paul Berg,
I, Paul Berg,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear, affirm,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
and I will faithfully discharge all of the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Come down, please. I'd like to swear in Dr. Calamay. I'm going to come around. Isn't your wife's timing perfect? Raise your right hand, please. I, David Calamay,
I, David Calamay,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
and that I will faithfully discharge all of the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the office of Library Trustee of the Village of Morton Grove
to the
to
best
the
of
best
my
of my ability.
Perfect. Congratulations. And pass them to the acting president, that would be great. Thank you. Catherine Peters. All right, if you'd raise your right hand, please. I, Catherine Peters.
I, Catherine Peters,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. All right, now Kristen Quinn.
Kindergarten diplomas was fun.
Okay, you should have it memorized by now. Take it away.
I, Krista Quinn.
Sorry,
I got the first good.
All right, raise your right hand, please. I, Krista Quinn,
I, Krista Quinn,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Village of Morton Grove,
and that I will faithfully discharge all of the duties of the Office of Library Trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of Library Trustee
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
of the Village of Morton Grove to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Now Carrie's here to play two roles tonight besides swearing in. She is going to kind of give us a brief rundown of the bonding authority issue between the library board and the village board. There seems to be some confusion here of what powers the library board has and what they're capable of doing or forcing the village to do. So I don't know how to, it's not as simple.
And maybe one of the best ways for me to answer your questions or concerns is for you to tell me what your questions or concerns are. So I will hear your questions, I'll do my best. But let me start off by stating that there's different ways throughout the state of Illinois that libraries are created. The Village of Morton Grove's public library is created through the Illinois Local Library Act. It is somewhat confusing, but you are a self-governing, self-elected board, but you are part of the village government. Your budget is passed and adopted by you, but then it's sent to the village and it becomes part of the village budget. Your levy is requested by you, this board, but it's the village, and when I say the village, I mean the village trustees. They have the authority to pass a levy ordinance and to send it to the county clerk who intends to process it, and that's how your taxes are paid. The Village of Morton Grove is a home rule unit of government. That is a creation pursuant to the most recent constitution of the state of Illinois, which states that municipalities over, I think it's 26,000, or municipalities that adopt an referendum that seeks to become home rule, which this village did in 1980, I believe, has the right to make rules and regulations different from state statutes so long as they are matters of local concern. One of the matters of local concern is the right to issue bonds. This library board has no power whatsoever to issue bonds. The Village of Morton Grove does. Non-home rule communities, in order to raise taxes above tax caps or issue bonds, they need to pass referendums. Our village can just adopt a bond ordinance. There had been talk, I believe, as this library board explored whether or not expansion was in the best interest of the village. If it were to do that, they wanted to know whether or not there was support of the community. So that's where the talk of an advisory referendum came to be. The law, if you search Illinois statutes for the word referendum, you won't find it. You'll find it under questions of public policy, or questions of public interest. By law, an advisory referendum has no legal force or effect, but it is a bellwether for elected officials to wishes of the community. Village library boards and village boards will use advisory referendums for different reasons and give it different weight depending on how overwhelming it passed or didn't pass, how many people actually took the time to vote. All of those things are considered, but in the end, there's no law that says a referendum passed, we must go forward, or a referendum didn't pass, we must stop. Dan, I think that answered your question on the advisory
Yes,
referendum.
and it's advisory to the village board as far as issuing bonds.
And I don't know how much, and really, I'd rather answer your questions than talk. I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but I know that there were questions about, can this library board issue bonds? The answer is no. Can this library board, on its own, approve a new building? And my opinion as Corporation Counsel of the Village of Morton Grove, reading the Local Library Act, is not without the approval of the corporate authorities, and the corporate authorities is your village board. And I might be answering questions that aren't asked, but
Anything that would clear up any misunderstandings,
yeah.
because I know they're out there.
But, did anyone have any other questions? Good, Goldstein.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right there, we don't need
Thank
you
you.
anymore.
That's great. I'm gonna move.
I know, it's 15 minutes was only 12.
You're nothing if you're not fast.
Thank you. Now, we also have with us this evening, we're gonna get these presentations out of the way so these people can move on with their lives. We have Dan Berg. You can get up and introduce yourself, Dan. Dan is our auditor. Dan has audited the library for the last, how many years?
Let's say
8 years, at least. And he's gonna try to explain the process of the audit and what gets covered in this audit. Because once again, I know there's been misunderstandings of what happens with the library audits.
Thank you all for having me. I was the auditor, I was the signing partner for the audit for 2009. We rotated partners for 2010, so I did not perform that audit. It just wrapped up, I believe it was last week or the week before, over at Village Hall. And we're in the process of writing that report. So what I've handed out is literally pages from the 2009 audit report. It's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that have to do with the library. And please jump in with any questions you might have. Go ahead and interrupt me, because I'm certainly don't have a script, so to speak. What Ben asked me to do is simply explain our role as auditors of the village to you and as it pertains to the library.
Okay, can you start off by saying who hires you?
Okay. As Terry was saying, you're a component, what's defined under GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board. There's two setting regulation setting bodies. One's called FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board. They handle all the businesses and all the not-for-profit entities in the country, in the United States. And then we have Government Accounting Standards Board. That's why your financial statements look so much different than a business, okay? Under GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, you fall under what's called a component unit. And because you're separately elected, we don't call you a fund of the village, and we don't add you in when we come up with the total numbers. The village hires us, and you have the ability to go out and hire somebody else to do your audit, but it's almost always way more cost effective to just ask the village and kind of piggyback on the contract, if you will, of the village's audit. Otherwise, you have two firms. One, the village auditors would be waiting on the library auditors to complete their work, deliver it over to the village or to the village's auditors to be included in the village's audit. So what I've done, okay,
Yes, yes.
okay, so what I've done is I've taken all the pages in the report that relate to you. As you can see, this report is 125 pages, probably a dozen and a half are yours, okay? The first 2 pages are the only part that's really the auditors, and that's the opinion. Each year that we've done the audit for the village and the library, we've had what's commonly referred to as a clean opinion. And all that says, and at the bottom of page 1 here, is that the basic statements, basic financial statements presented above, or referred to above, present fairly in all material respects, okay? So we're only looking at, we're not looking at every single transaction. We're certainly not looking at every single bank rec or month. We're looking at the numbers in total for the library and the village, okay? So we have to look at the numbers in total for the library and say, how much, if it was wrong, would it take to be misleading? If we had a mistake in here, or if the library's numbers were a little bit off, how much before it'd be misleading? And that's the concept of materiality. It doesn't have to be exactly right. It has to be materially correct, okay? So when we do an audit, we do it on a test basis. We don't audit every transaction. We audit the year-end numbers, and we audit the numbers that led up to the year-end. In other words, we audit as a specific date, the balance sheet, and that's cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and equity. And then we audit the year-end totals for revenues and expenditures, okay? And again, please jump in and interrupt at any time. So flipping over to the 3rd page in this package, this is kind of the top of the reporting pyramid. The back of the report rolls forward to the top of the reporting pyramid, so these are the biggest numbers. So if we added up all the village numbers and they're divided into the village column called governmental activities, that's all your general funds, special revenue funds, all that kind of stuff over at the village. Then the business type activities is their water and sewer fund. Then we come up with a total. You're outside the total. You're the next column over. Because the village board doesn't exercise enough control over you and the library's activities, we don't include you in the total. In other words, you make the day-to-day decisions that run this library, and the village isn't going to take responsibility for that. You can't get, as Terry was explaining before, you can't get your tax levy passed without the village passing it. We'll get to that in a moment. And you can't issue debt without the village passing it. But you have the day-to-day responsibilities of running this library, or actually Ben does, and you direct him. Okay, that's why you're outside the total. Does that make sense? That's referred to as discretely presented. If you're inside the total, we blend you. It's just accounting terminology. So that's the top of the pyramid, and this column is designed to make you look like a business. Okay? We have the fixed assets of the library here as the last line item, last 2 line items of the asset section. And we also include some long-term liabilities which you have in the form of what we call compensated absences payable, vacation and sick time payable. So if everybody were to quit on December 31st, 2009, how much would you still owe the employees for accumulated vacation? And then at the bottom is your net assets. We don't call it retained earnings in government, we call it net assets. Okay? Because it's not quite the same. But we break those up into how much of the net assets isn't spendable In other words, it's already been spent, it's invested in capital assets, net of related debt, you have no related debt. You're one of the few libraries that we audit that don't have any debt. It's a good thing, in most cases. Other libraries, they incur debt, to build out, or to build new libraries, expand, what have you. Or simply don't have enough money on hand to repair the roof or what have you. And then the bottom part, where it says, the second to the last number on the page on the far right corner, culture and recreation, $2,092,000. That's your net assets that's usable to spend on library activities. Falls under culture and recreation as your function.
Dan,
Second
question.
Absolutely.
Well, we have no debt, and that's wonderful.
Mhm.
We have cash assets.
Yes, you do.
Is there a
1.9
limit, is there a limit to the amount of cash you can have on hand?
Absolutely not.
No.
No.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right. Good.
Yeah. Question, those cash assets
Mhm.
are operating funds, they don't represent totally a reserve, but the money that flows through from the county.
Correct.
It's basically our checkbook balance.
I hope it's not all in checking. but
Yeah,
yes.
but-
It's in a bunch of
That
things.
is the money to run the library on
Yes.
for the year.
Just as an aside here, we have, because of the way Illinois property taxes are 1 year in arrears, you levied them in December. Hi, nice to see you. Nice to see you. And many years that I've been at this table, she was sitting across from me.
36.
Right. Because the levy is 1 year in arrears, it attaches on January 1, in this case 2009. You levied it in December, but it attaches as a lien. We put in the property taxes receivable, 2.8 million, but we don't recognize it as revenue. Just because it's receivable doesn't mean it's revenue to you yet. It's intended to finance fiscal, in this case 2010, the same financial statements for fiscal 2011. So therefore we have unearned property taxes, 2.7 million. Okay, so we account for property taxes you're going to get, but we don't add it into revenue, and therefore it doesn't fall to the bottom line in net assets. Does that make sense? That's probably the most confusing thing that people in Illinois have, is the property tax side. The following page is just to give you an idea of how the village views you and GASB views you. And if you go to page, it's labeled page 4, and you run your finger down the left-hand column, those are all the activities of the village, your last. And then you run your finger across, and you get to page 5, and then go all the way to the end, and again, your last. So you're not part of the village, is the whole point of this. Let's flip over to page 18 of the notes to the financial statements. At the bottom of the page is a description of why you're in the financial statements in the first place. It simply says you're a separately elected board, but the village is subject to the acceptance. That's Mrs. Cooperman's word. Other towns use the word approval. But while we were doing the audit, Mrs. Cooperman, Trustee Cooperman, insisted that they cannot approve it. They only can accept it, because when you give them your tax levy, when you give them their budget, they don't have an option to change it. They either take it as is and accept it, or reject it. They take your tax levy, pass it along to the county, you'll get your taxes, okay? If they reject it, you gotta come back and you're gonna have to negotiate with the village. Some of my clients actually meet with the village ahead of time to figure out what the village will allow them to do. That's very rare, okay? So, I just wanted to include that page so that you understood your role in this. Okay. What we've done in the financial statements is to take all of your notes to the financial statements and have a separate section. So pages 64 through 74 are your notes to the financial statements. So if you ever paid us enough money to create a separate report for you, the way I designed it is I could just pull this out and add a few more pages, and boom, you'd have your own report. What we decided was that it was confusing filtering in various sections of this report, your stuff versus the village stuff, okay? So this is your section. So if you have a CAFR from, I'm sorry, here, I'm using acronyms again. Comprehensive Annual Financial Report of the Village. You can look up these, but now that you have these, you can just use them. What it does is it describes how we account for you, how the village accounts for you, how you account for you. You use funds, and and it kind of goes on and on about each of the major types of assets, each of the major types of liabilities. It also talks about what you're allowed to invest in and what your deposits are invested in, which is the Illinois funds for the most part. Talks a little bit about the property tax calendar. On page 69, and 70, there's a table that goes into some detail about what your capital assets are and their activity. In 2009, there was no activity, only depreciation of $35,000. And it talks a little bit about long-term debt. You really have none. That's just compensated absences, which is, as we said, vacations. Okay? You talk about your involvement in the municipal retirement fund, employee retirement fund, which is actually through the village. And there's several pages on that. That brings us to page 105 of the village's cap. And under governmental accounting standards, during the course of the audit, we have to audit you two ways. We have to do a balance sheet, which is on the modified accrual basis. A modified accrual basis was designed to mirror the budget. The budget is good for only 1 year. Modified accrual means that we're not going to pick up long-term assets. We're not going to pick up long-term debt. Those aren't what's necessary to get you through the year. We're going to take care of your cash needs and your revenues and expenditures that occur during a year. Okay? So if you thought of the budgetary basis, that's what's in the balance sheet, and on page 106, that's what's in the first actual column there. All right? We're only talking about current liabilities. We're only talking about current assets. So we're talking about cash, receivables, and the normal payables that will be liquidated during the year. And then because that doesn't mirror a business's financial statements or not-for-profit's financial statements, we don't call it retained earnings. We don't call it net assets. We call it fund balance. It's literally the difference between current assets and current liabilities. Okay? And we break that down by what's spendable versus what's not spendable. You already spent things in prepaids. You already prepaid some insurance and a few other things. Okay? Some subscriptions usually in December because they want their money in order to send you the January, whatever. All right? You've already spent that money. That's not spendable. But that $2 million, $2,006,771 is spendable by the library board on library activities.
Dan, by understanding that what this statement reflects, is the actual amount of money on, essentially, the amount of money on hand as of the date of this balance sheet.
Correct.
And does not reflect the ups and downs that occur as a result of the way payments are received from the state of Illinois.
Correct. You really don't get much from the state of Illinois.
Or from the county.
From
the county, excuse me. It
Right.
does not reflect the ups and downs based on the way the county disperses tax revenue.
If you look at the very top of the page in the left column, balance sheet, that balance of $1,900,000 would fluctuate significantly during the year, especially January, where you receive virtually no taxes in a normal year. We're not living in normal times the way Cook County has been distributing taxes. So there are peaks and valleys in your cash balances that have to be planned for by Ben and Blanche in order to not have to borrow money at various times during the year. Because you're going to get the first, I'm sure you all got your first tax bill in February and made those payments. God bless you. And that's a big chunk. That's 55% of the prior year tax levy. okay? So you're only gonna receive another 45 whenever they decide to send out the second tax bill, which last year was what, November? Okay?
After the election.
After the, immediately after the election, that's correct. Good call. But that was supposed to, by law, go out August 1st. Okay? Collected in September and distributed in September. So you had literally between the end of March and the beginning or middle of November with no property taxes rolling in. So it's a good thing you have $1.9 million back then. I'm not sure what you have right now.
Yeah, we just had $900,000 this month, which was
Right.
very
So-
unusual.
So that's why you need such, what some people would think is fairly healthy balances. And you know, as of December 31st, I would say that is a healthy balance. But bear in mind that there is no reservation here for your future capital plans to spend that money either. We didn't break that out.
You mentioned, and it was a slight conflict with something you said earlier.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That if we did not have sufficient balance on hand to cover our bills at a particular moment in time through the year, we would have to borrow money.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't borrow money. So what would be our recourse then to fill that gap?
You could
If
ask.
that's within your purview.
Well, Terry would probably be better off answering this than I, but I would assume that you would have to ask the village permission to seek tax anticipation loans, which would be paid off when the taxes come in. And that's been happening quite regularly in school districts, and some of my village clients have needed tax anticipation ones. Luckily, none of my libraries so far have needed that, but I'm guessing, it's just a guess, that you would probably have to ask the village permission to get, and they would have to pass an ordinance allowing you to get tax anticipation warrants, because unless a bank is very unsavvy in the ways of local governments in Illinois, they wouldn't issue them.
Is there an interest cost to that?
Oh, heck yeah. And nobody lends you money for free.
That's what I thought.
So, it probably is less, it's probably in the 5% range, because short-term debt is a little more expensive to borrow than long-term debt.
Right. And Illinois Fund is paying us approximately 0.025% right now.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any laws that have been passed that state when the county has to pony up for money to libraries like us?
Well, the libraries the county's bylaws and the state, Cook County has a different tax calendar than every other county in the state, okay? Everybody else is a May and September, and you pay them June 1 and September, and all the other counties get their tax bills out on time or, within a day or two. And Cook County's been like this for a number of years. Nobody's taken them on in court as far as I know.
But
I'm sorry, hi.
But there is nothing written as to when, say, if they even send it out like they sent it out very late in November this year, is there a date, a standard time of, say, 3 or 4 months, and when that money is to be allocated to the various municipalities?
They pay it out when they receive it. That's it. The county treasurer is actually pretty good at distributing the funds, and actually distributes more often than anybody else in the state. Everybody else does it twice a month. And the Cook County treasurer pretty much does it weekly.
Okay, so we have received some money from the November taxes already.
All of it. You should have received literally all of every dime that's coming to you.
At this point.
At
yes,
this point.
But that means we probably will not
55%.
receive any more for several months.
Not
And
until,
we've gone for more than a quarter without a tax
You're
payment.
talking September, minimally.
Right, so we always carry, that's why we have a reserve.
best case scenario would be September.
Yeah.
Last year, again, it was November
Yep.
into December, and a big chunk of money coming in January, literally, 4 months later.
Yeah. Trustee Berg, we were down to about under $500,000 in cash on hand at one point last year, with about 3 months to go. And no expectation is when we would receive any money from the county. So we've come that close, and I can see it's coming closer.
Thank
No, no problem. And does anybody else have any? Okay. All right, the reason there's an adjustment column here is, remember at the top of the pyramid that we had and at the very front of the report, we're required to convert your modified accrual financial statements to full accrual. And the only thing, it's very, very simple for us to do it here at Morton Grove Public Library. It's the easiest conversion we do. We add in the fixed assets and we subtract out your vacations payable. You're done. Okay? There's no debt, there's no complicated financing or retirement plans or lack of funding to those retirement plans. So really, that adjustment column is literally adding in your capital assets, net of depreciation, and subtracting out your vacations payable. And that's all that does, that column. So that gives you a full accrual financial statements called the statement of net assets. And over on the income statement side, we don't call it that in government, we call it much more lengthy, statement of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balance. But then we have to convert it to the statement of activities, so we add in the expenses for a change in the vacations, and then your depreciation expense, about $35,000. So about $1,000 for increase in vacations payable, and your depreciation expense is about $35,000 a year. So that's what's in that column, adjustments there. And that gets you to net asset. So,
Unfunded liability for our retirement plan.
the way retirement plans are funded is to have an actuary tell you how much you need to put in to get it to be funded at a specific date and time. That's called the required contribution. On an annual basis, or actually it's every other year, the village hires an actuary to determine, on page 72 and 73 of the village's notes, or your notes of the financial statements in the village's report. The valuation's done as of the beginning of the year, trying to figure out, well, it's actually done as of December 31st, but we label it January 1st, 2009. So you get an actuary to tell you how much you're going to need at a date and time, and that is the amortization period, 29 years from that date. You need a pot of money, theoretically, to be fully funded on that date in 29 years. How much is it going to take? Okay? And then amortize that back, present value that back. How much do we have to put in today to get to that dollar amount? And then they consider things like the rate of return, the increases in salaries on an annual basis, and then if there's going to be any additional payments necessary for additional benefits, and we label that in them. So on the following page, we start out with what the actuary told us was the library's portion of the funding for the Municipal Employees Retirement Fund, affectionately known as MRF. So you were required, annual required contributions would have been $78,000. Back out interest on that money that's owed, and then any adjustments. So your annual pension cost was $77,000. You contributed just an eyelash short of that. Okay, but so $39 less. But in prior years, you actually had an asset. You've actually contributed more than necessary in prior years, so that accumulated excess that you've paid in is an asset of $71,000. Okay? All of this is based on actuaries, and at the bottom there on page 73, we give you a 3-year trend schedule of what was required, the APC, the annual pension cost. It went from $63,000 in 2007 up to $77,000. Not a lot of money, but percentage-wise, pretty healthy increase, right? And that is direct result of the lack of investment earnings that were available to every pension fund. And your 401k plans, many people were joking that they became 201k plans. But that's literally what happened to everybody's pension funds too. And that, because the assumption rate of return is 7.5%, and they were getting 2% or losing money, now somebody's gonna have to make that up, and that's you. Okay? So, but you are very close to 100% contributing how much you're required to contribute. When you hear in Illinois how police and fire pensions and other pension plans are underfunded, it's because some municipalities in the state of Illinois in particular have chosen not to put in as much as the actuaries have been telling them they needed to put in. That's certainly an option, but as an auditor, we don't like to see that. So you've been doing, the library historically has been doing what it has been asked to do and required to do by the actuaries. Make sense?
Any other questions about the audit that has been done and the way it is done? Because we will go into the questions about what audit. There are some questions about the more specific finances of the library over the last few years, and the word forensic audit has been thrown out there.
Okay.
And what would that entail? Well, is that something you guys do? What is the cost involved in that, and what is the final results of?
Let me give you
what would that show?
A little more detail on what we do as auditors. We contact the library and the village well before the fiscal year ends. And we come out generally in either November or December, sometimes depending on how their budget is going in their tax levy process. The finance department's up to its ears in work, and they ask us to wait till January. That happens from time to time. We like to get in as early as possible, either before the fiscal year ends or after the fiscal year ends. And the reason being is we want to see what's going on. We want to take a physical tour of what has been changed, what the library has been spending its money on, if there's any alterations to the building and whatnot. So you kind of want to inspect some things as close to year end as possible. But you also want to talk to the staff to find out what's been going on and inform them of any new rules, regulations, those GASB standards that I alluded to earlier. Sometimes there's one or two that affects a municipality and a library. There will be one where you're going to have to come up with a new fund balance policy in the near future for next fiscal year. But be that as it may, we want the best clients that we have are the most prepared clients. So the smarter we can make our clients and the more we can explain to them ahead of time, the easier our audit's going to be. It's just that. So if we can teach them what they need to know about the upcoming laws and take a look at the preliminary financial statements from either November or hopefully December, we can say, okay, here's what we're going to need you to do. The other thing we like to do is we read the board minutes to find out what decisions have been made, what you've been spending your money on, and get a flavor of what's been going on that way. We ask for changes to internal controls, how you do business. Okay, if anything's been tweaked, we're required to do that. And we drop the F-bomb pretty regularly. And by that I mean fraud. We talk about fraud up front and often. And we ask them where they think fraud could occur. And we ask you where you think fraud can occur. We give you on an annual basis in the form of a questionnaire, about 8 or 10 questions that we if you don't send it, we'll send you another and another and another, and then we'll email it. But we need you to respond where you think fraud may be occurring, why, what you're doing about it, and whether you've committed any fraud. We hope you don't take offense to that. Nobody's ever answered yes. But they say if you don't ask, nobody's going to tell you. So that's all in a questionnaire that you receive annually. Okay. We also want to make sure that we can schedule the time that we're supposed to be there, that they're not going to be on vacation, and that they'll give us what we need. Now, what we're going to be doing, as I said, is audit the specific balances as of the date and time, a balance sheet, and then also look at the the revenues and expenses. And you can do that in a variety of ways. And to be honest with you, some of our competition simply look at last year's numbers, compare it to budget, compare it to actual, run some formulas and say, this increased 15%, why? And Ben would tell them, and they'd say, okay, and write that down, et cetera, et cetera. What we choose to do is beat up the numbers. We actually test the numbers. We look at the bank reconciliation and make sure there's nothing that shouldn't be on there. We look at payments made in January, February, and March of the next year to see what should have been pulled back into the current year as an account payable. What was paid out in January for payroll and vacations to make sure that what that needs to be pulled back. How many days did you work in December but get paid in January for it? Things like that. So we're going to test any cash receipts in January to see if those should be pulled back, if there's a receivable that should have been booked. A lot of that. Then we're going to look at the numbers on the income statement, property taxes. We're going to confirm with the county what they sent you. And then we're going to, because money comes in late or early, never early, because it comes late, what should have been paid by the county the prior year. So that's why your receivable number doesn't equal your deferred number. There's more that was received in January and February of 2010 that should have been received in December of 2009. We're going to look at any grants you may have received. You get one, the per capita grant that comes from the state of Illinois. We can log on to their website and make sure that number is 100% correct. Because you're December 31 year end, we can look at your December bank statements and see what was paid in interest, you know, that year-to-date interest that's on all of your bank statements. That's an easy number to audit. Then we're going to look at what you told the federal government you paid employees to tie out the personnel number, the salaries. We're going to look at what you paid in withholding for IMRF, FICA, and Medicare, and make sure those numbers are correct. And then we're going to select certain invoices and tie out on a test basis what you spent on books, maintenance, electricity, and everything else. But we like to look at invoices rather than just compare this year to last year and come up with formulas. We do a little bit of that because we need to decide what does look strange. If you spent no money on books this year, that would be strange. You know, we're going to look for variations, and then we're going to ask why, and then we're going to test the numbers too. That's an audit in a nutshell. We got a lot of forms to fill out.
Have you ever found any fraud in this library?
In this library? No.
Thank you.
And one of the things that we ask elected officials and staff is to help us look for fraud. We have a duty to inquire about it, and if we hear of any or have an inkling, audit in that direction. And believe me, we've been sent on some wild goose chases by either disgruntled employees or bad information. But we follow up on it as best we can and test what we can. So, and it's become a hot topic. And quite frankly, there's been a couple of cases of fraud at some entities in Illinois in the last several years. We've probably read about it. But we have never seen anything here. The best thing that a library has going for it is its board. The individuals that work here create purchases by ordering books, etc. The invoices come along with a packing slip that's matched to the invoice. It's approved by the executive director, and then it comes to you for approval. You set the budget, and you approve all the checks that go out the door. There's a corporation that you work for probably that has that level of control, that has redundancies like that built in.
In your package that you receive monthly, and then at our meetings and at the finance meetings before, 2 days before our board meetings, you can go over the check register that comes in there. This is every check written out to every vendor of the month. There's no other cash being spent in this building that is not in this check register. So this would be your time when we go through that report to question any of these checks to any of the vendors. There's Blanche prints up a nice sheet for the newest. You'll get to know these vendors just because you'll see them often, but Blanche also includes a sheet of vendors that we may not use that often, so you can look them up and what they provide. Yes.
President Hoffman, why, what exactly is this piece of
That is a
paper?
sheet of paper that has the vendors on it, so that, is that what you're holding up? Yeah, so that way you could check, say, check number 33060. That's not good.
And I have a question. Why does this list not match the check register list? There are 41 checks that are not on here that
There, like I said, she doesn't do all of them, but this is just most of them.
Well,
I mean, this
there's
is,
41 of them.
well,
that
this
are
would be
in-
your chance during the financial report, would be to ask any questions you have about checks that are questionable. So this is,
Yeah, I'm asking more about the report, why the
Okay.
reports don't match. If
I
there's an
did-
answer for that.
this is just a list for reference. This is not a report, this is just so in case you have any questions, that this will cover the bulk of them. And then there'll always be something else out there.
Basically, what happens is that checks that are repeated every month, for example, to the Wellness Network for health insurance, you won't see that check on that report. That's a monthly.
Actually, it is on the
Right.
report.
Okay.
And for certain vendors like Baker and Taylor Books, there's 4 of them listed here, but there were 5 written. And I can't see any consistency in what makes it from this page to the other page.
Trustee Peters, maybe I can explain. This is simply a key to the names of the vendors. We've given checks this time so that you can see where the examples are in the actual register. This is simply like on a map where you have a legend that says, this symbology means this. We use a number of initials in the actual check register, which is this document. And this is the official report out of our accounting system that tells you every check that was paid in the prior month. This document,
It's in your package.
this document is simply a key to some of the codes. And because there are so many new trustees on the board at this meeting, to make it easier for you to do the cross-referencing, we gave some check numbers as examples of where you would see those keys, those initials on the register, so you can see the full names on this. This is not expected to be, it's not designed to be a complete replication of this. This is the register, this is simply a key to the initials. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know if I'm talking too much.
No, keep
I-
going. Fascinating.
To me, it is. I'm one of the few people in the room that thinks an audit is fascinating. Believe me. Usually I can clear a room like that when I talk about it.
And the cost of a,
You know what, I just,
does it depend on how many layers we'd like you to peel back?
well, yeah, sometimes. It also depends basically on how much work we need to do, how much help an entity needs in being audited. A lot of the entities that we work with, the village, for instance, has Ryan Horn and Remy Navarrete working in their finance department, and they've been audited a lot. And actually, I think Ryan used to be an auditor at one time. So they know what we need, and we've trained them well, and they give us pretty much what we need. When we come over here, we work with Blanche and Ben to get us what we need, and we assist them by writing some of the journal entries and assist them in creating the accounts payable listing and assist them in recording some of the activity. We bill the village. Do we bill you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
$4,000.
it's probably about $4,000.
Mhm.
If you were to go out on your own, when I do a library district, as an example, Wilmette is its own library district. They're not a village library. It's about an $8,500 audit. Might be $9,000. Right in that ballpark. So that's what it would cost for us to set up a file for this entity and create a report just for this entity. Okay? So that's some of why it's much higher. But by being part of the village, being done in concert with the village, at the same time, the travel costs, the staffing, things like that, and the fact that we don't have to set up a separate folder, a separate file, and all of the work that goes along, all the checklists that we need to do so that the people that audit us, the peer reviewers, every 3 years we get a peer review, which is going to start in a couple of months. But there's rules and regulations on how to do an audit, and somebody checks up on us. we've never had a comment, we've never had any issues with that. So,
Is there any way that we can prepare better to make your job easier?
well, we coach you guys a little bit every year. And to be honest with you, we have a whole new audit team this year. For 2010 was a completely different audit team than has been in the past. Just trying to give the village and the library a new look, a new set of eyes, so to speak. Each individual, though we work for the same firm, has a different auditor judgment, and we thought that would benefit the village and the library. So that's how we chose to staff it. You mentioned a forensic audit. That has not been done here in the past. There's never been an inkling that it was required. Each board can spend their money how they see fit. However, we haven't found a need in the past to delve into issues that we encountered during the audit more thoroughly, or to go to that extent. I have done some of that work in the past. When we ran into a fraud at one of my villages, and there's been an indictment but not a conviction, so I prefer not to tell you all about it. But what they decided to do is have us look at every bank rec for 4 years, and that cost them about $45,000. We didn't look at every transaction. We took a statistical sample and we downloaded their database of every check written, and we looked at every bank statement to look for anything that looks suspicious, quite frankly. And that's a lot of work. And that's a lot of money. And we didn't find any more than we had found before. So some would say that was money out the door. But it gave them peace of mind. That was after a fraud had been found. That's after the finance director got caught. That caused that. So, and again, a forensic audit is a generic term that the public uses and the press uses. It's not a term that is normally used by auditors. There are special fraud auditors out there, and there are guidelines of what to look for and how to look for it, and certain tests. But what's more commonly done is an agreed upon procedures engagement, where I would create some procedures that I think might be necessary or might be what you're looking for. You tell me whether they're right or wrong, and we literally agree upon them. And we set costs and parameters. But normally, it would be very expensive to go through and look at more transactions than we look at now. It's all additional billing.
Okay, we have to discuss that as a board in the near future, and well, of course, we'll call you back and have you give a proposal, but we'll have to talk to other auditing firms also to make a decision. And would anyone else have questions for Dan before we?
I think they should understand one thing. One of us, the trustee at this time is myself, as the treasurer, has to co-sign every check that goes out other than payroll, which is found out. That position is only held for 2 years and then it's rotated amongst the previous one to me was Agnes. To you.
On a monthly basis. For certain transactions, not to get posted on a timely basis. All but one of my clients are on a cash basis month to month. Then they convert to accrual basis, modified and full accrual at year end. So it's just a listing of checks going out the door and checks coming in, money coming in. But you need to keep an eye on how you're spending your money, how it's recorded, and whether or not you're within the budget. Get a plan, stick to the plan. Institutions that get in trouble don't stick to the plan. That's what a budget is. It's a plan. That's your game plan. Stick to it. Don't get crazy. and basically you need to look at your mission statement and look at your core principles and adhere to those in all cases. Decide what you want to be and be that. Don't try to be Schaumburg Township Public Library or smaller libraries. Serve the people. That's the best thing I can tell you. Make sure they get good value for their tax money.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, very much. Good to talk to you.
And we're your auditors, we work for you, okay? If you ever have questions and you're not satisfied with staff's answers, by all means, contact your auditors, okay?
Can you leave us a card?
Absolutely, I'll leave you.
Thank you.
I get them free. No, nothing's free. Take them.
We need to set up for the next group's recess for a few minutes.
Oh,
Project.
okay.
I think that should be enough.
Great, thanks. Thanks. All right, you're passing. All right, we're gonna take one couple minute break here while the next presenters.
You get yell action?
All right, everyone. We have representatives from Engberg Anderson, who were hired, about 18 months ago to basically do an evaluation of our building because the Board of Trustees just knew it was old and there were roof leaks and air conditioning units breaking pretty much weekly. And we needed to know what the condition of this building actually was and what our options of replacing, repairing, or expanding our facility could be. And this somehow or another has gotten to the point where people were saying that we were planning on building into a $30 million library somewhere. But you're about to see the report that was given to us and what our decisions since then have been made from. So, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Tom Hoffman with Engberg Anderson. This is Joe Gearby, partner in charge of this job with Engberg Anderson. Like Dan said, we put together a report initially for the library, various sites around town, for this site as well. Almost a year ago tomorrow, we last presented to the board with regards to what it would take to bring this building up to standards and the building condition as it stands right now. So what you see in front of you is what we were asked to do initially for this report, which was to find out the condition of the facility, how well it functions as a library building, identify the space needs that are required for a building for a community of your size, and then explore different and various options. So what I want to go through very quickly is sort of this legacy of this building, how it got to where it is today. And it was built in 3 different periods, 1952, 1962, and 1980. And you can see with the structure of the building, which are these, and it's hard to see, but the red lines are bearing walls, which hold up, the floor and the roof, as well as a series of columns that are very closely spaced for a library. It doesn't exactly give you the flexibility of a modern library today, which of course we wouldn't expect it to because it was built in it started to be built in 1952 and added on ever since. So, so flexibility isn't exactly there. There is some issues with not only the sort of the horizontal nature of the structure, the columns and the bearing walls, but also the vertical nature, the floor heights. As we all know, the mezzanine and the stack area below the mezzanine are very tight headrooms, as well as down in the lower level. In fact, it's so low we have to put caution signs on the piping. So there's some drawbacks and flexibility issues with the physical building itself. The mechanical systems, again, because it was built in 3 different phases, there are then a normal amount of mechanical rooms spread throughout the building. They're all kind of small. They all do separate things. They're not interconnected. They don't talk to each other. And consequently, some of these zones, which are indicated in the ovals, are really hard to regulate. It's either going to be too hot, too cold. There's no zoning If one is, one level's just right, it's guaranteed that the level above is not going to be just right. So there are issues there. On the roof, there are also a number of mechanical units that need to be addressed as well. You can see this unit in particular, but I would say the majority of the mechanical units that run the building are at the end of their life expectancy. Does it mean that they're going to break down tomorrow? No. Well, hopefully not. But these are 18 years old. Our mechanical engineer that went through the building said that the life expectancy of this mechanical unit is 18 years. So we're somewhere close to the end of its life expectancy. Let me just go back here. That blue box is new, and it's an attempt to control the unit a little bit better than what it had been. But still, that's the only thing new about this. Power and data. One of the backbones of the modern library is data and technology, getting that to the end user. Because of the structure of the building, that's been hard to do. You can see in those small ovals, which correspond a lot to the service desk, the staff area, and the computer room, and of course this room. Those are all technology-rich areas. The rest of the library is not so rich. It's lacking in data. It's lacking in power outlets to power laptops. So there's a big void in the library with regards to how you can get technology to the patron. Here's some valiant attempts by Ben to actually get technology to the patrons. You can see it's been retrofitted in a number of different ways. Here, climbing up the pole there. So there's been attempts to actually get that done to the physical plan itself, but it is it's catch as catch can. Lighting is another issue. You can see that most lighting is recessed in buildings today. We have the surface-mounted lights. What's happening is that the ceiling of this room and all of the mezzanine is held up by the bottom cord of the roof truss. So it's hard to go up into that roof truss with the lighting, with mechanical, things like that. And in certain instances, the ceiling in the mezzanine has asbestos in it. So again, that's another issue that we're going to have to deal with. But the lighting is well, first, it's not energy efficient any longer. There are codes for the amount of energy that you use to control the lighting. We're over that, obviously. There are some areas that are better than others with regards to lighting, and it has to do with either the taller spaces or it has to do with the spaces near the windows. Obviously, natural light really helps us with the lighting, but you can see in the red ovals, those are the areas where we have substandard lighting or substandard controls. The green areas are where the lighting is better. And here you can see in the lower level, in the children's area, the lighting is actually built into the structure. So all those horizontal pieces running in the ceiling are actually pieces of structure that the light is then put into or inserted in between. So what happens is that there's really no room to adjust the lighting because it's in the structure. The same is true in the lighting in the mezzanine, where it's surface mounted here because there is asbestos in the ceiling. All right? There's low headroom there. The lighting, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the lighting is centered on the stacks. And the problem with that is that you can't move your stacks. And right now we're not compliant with the room that we need in between each stack. So we're going to have to move, if we want to be compliant with the ADA, we're going to have to move our stacks a little bit wider. But we can't, because we can't move our lights, it causes a little bit of problem. well, we could move our lights, but it's just more money. We can do anything, it's just more money. Acoustics, as we all know, there is no acoustic privacy in this building, or not much of it, and it has to do with the center spine, and not necessarily the form of the center spine, but all the hard surfaces that the sound gets knocked around and then into the mezzanine or into the smaller rooms just off of it. So there's acoustic privacy that because of the form of the building, because of the surfaces of the building, it's pretty loud. Capacity. All those red ovals are where we are at capacity or above. There are some areas, like the reading room, reference area, reading room here, where we have some capacity to add more stacks and more books. But then it becomes an issue of, well, we're splitting all these different collections and all these little spaces. How do we actually find a book? You know, how do you find a fiction book if you stop here, you know, with one letter, and then you have to go to halfway across the library to pick it up? So there's some flexibility issues here with the stack layout. And all these images, you know, we didn't pose any of these books. You can go to any stack you want and take a picture of it, and they're all full. In fact, in the teen area, you've got seating up against some of the stack, which makes it difficult to actually get to some of the material if someone's actually sitting there. In the children's area, it's the same thing. The stacks are purposely kept low because the children are lower, and they're just filled to capacity. Function. This is sort of the catch-all before we move into the ADA section of this talk, because there are some things about the library, especially before you actually get into the library. You know, the whole parking area coming right out into the parking lot from the front door, which is, quite frankly, it's dangerous. Going what used to be the original front door and not being able to go, or going into it sort of in a round, but not being able to go out the front door. I think the service desks are perfectly aligned. They're in the right location. They're a little bit dated. Ergonomically, they're not great, but people know where they are and are able to use them, you know, in a pretty good way. Getting upstairs and downstairs, if you've never been to this library, trying to find the stairs or knowing where they are intuitively is just impossible. So it's a big question about how to actually get up and down. And then lastly, it's the stack area here, and there's a big big elephant that we have to deal with is getting into those stacks from this area. So, and as you can see, the wayfinding, the staff has tried to cheer up that stairwell with images from the kids, but it's, you know, you don't know where you're going once you turn that corner. And we feel anytime you have to put a big arrow and let people know where you're going, the architect's done a bad job of wayfinding. So let's get to the ADA issues, because I know Ben said that the board is concerned with figuring out the ADA issues within the building. This by no means is an exhaustive study of those issues. When we did the report earlier on, we became acquainted with this building. We took a lot of photographs, and what you'll see today as a result of pairing those photographs up with the Illinois Accessibility Code, which we've used here. They have an appendix with illustrations. So what I've done is I've taken out some of these illustrations from the Illinois Accessibility Code and paired them with images of the library so that you can see where we are deficient in our accessibility. Majority of what we'll be talking about tonight has to do with the wheelchair and the turning radius of the wheelchair. So it's, if you keep in mind, a 60-inch diameter circle, or a turning radius of a wheelchair. And by no means is this the only sort of disability that we are talking about. You know, people with impaired vision or hearing are also part of what we're talking about
Caitlin, please come
tonight.
to circulation. Caitlin to circulation.
And in fact, this first slide indicates that there needs to be a detectable warning here and a curb where we have a vehicular access. You can see that we have a painted line that if you are visually impaired and you're using a cane, really doesn't help out a whole lot. And you're in the driving lane at that point. And there where we have the entrance, we actually bump out further into the driving lane to get into the front door. So we have to put a sidewalk here. And by code, we need to connect the public sidewalk with the front entrance. So you have two front entrances, so we have two options here. One is that we can put detectable warnings, we can put a sidewalk here, and then we would have to actually build out into the driving lane and make this an accessible entrance, or the original entrance to the building, we can make that accessible. So two different choices, two different costs. And by the way, I haven't put any cost to each one of these options. That would take a different and much more thorough report to go through. So I've just listed the problems, no solutions, sorry. One of the technical parts about the ADA has to do with the door swing. You need a minimum clear, not a minimum door, but a minimum clearance. And they define that from the jamb to the edge of the door here needs to be 32 inches. So if you have a 32-inch opening, which in fact you do, you don't have a 32-inch clearance. So the minimum door opening to get a 32-inch clearance is a 34-inch door. Typically in public buildings, we only put in 36-inch doors. All right. So it looks like it might be an easy fix. Just put in a bigger door there, put in a bigger door there for these bathrooms. Until you get to the next slide, which says, well, okay, if I have a wheelchair coming straight down here, I need, and there's a latch and a closer on this door, and there's always a closer on the bathroom door, because you don't want it remaining open. I don't know if there's a latch, but there are door handles here, so there might be a latch. You need a foot on that side. So if this goes up to 3 feet, and then you need a foot on the pull side, that's a 4-foot wide corridor. Your corridor is 3'9", so it's never going to work. All right. If we take a look at this door, same thing happens here, and we're going to need a 4-foot, 48-inch corridor. If we choose to make these accessible bathrooms. Now the code says that you only need, if you're doing alterations, you need one accessible set of bathrooms, one male, one female. So this may not be the good criteria or good candidate for an accessible bathroom. Another issue is the stack spacing. As I alluded to before, the stacks need to be 36 inches clear, minimum. We have, I had Ben measure them for me. The majority of them are 34 inches, 35 inches. They're close, but no cigar. They're not 36 inches. So we're going to have a problem, you know, moving these out a little bit, 1 or 2 inches. But at the end, our lighting here, if we choose to keep that, is no longer in the center of these stacks, right? So it's a lot of these things tend to snowball once you really take a look at it. This is another issue in that when you have a wheelchair and you have a 42-inch aisle, and then you have an obstruction, and in this obstruction, let's call it a book stack, you need an end aisle of 48 inches, or and if that obstruction is less than 4 feet. So our problem is that we don't have an end aisle. So it's, our end aisle is 0 next to the wall, but when we get to the column, and I'm sorry, this image is dark, but this is the mezzanine, and that's the handrail. We only have a gap of about 28 inches. So that's woefully inadequate at this point here. What we might be able to do is put chairs along the aisle here, or along the railing at this point, but then we make the aisle over here, and I think I have a plan coming up. I do. So on the first floor, let's take a look at these stacks, and these are, you can see here that this aisle is minuscule because we've got stacks next to the stairs. We have no end aisle here. We do have a less than 48-inch cross aisle at this point, but again, it's less than 48, and the majority of these aisles are less than 3 feet. So we have issues with all of those aisles. We have an issue with this aisle. And then I think one of the things that we have to do is to move all these books down and put an aisle in here. But again, that is going to be less than what we need. So we're going to end up losing a range of books all along here. So we have less collection at this point. Up in the mezzanine, again, the same thing happens, is that these aisles are too small. This cross aisle is too small. This cross aisle is actually too small. And so what has to happen is that we have to put a cross aisle over here, and then we have to put a cross aisle inboard of these columns. So we're losing...
May I have your attention, please? The library is closing in 30 minutes.
2 aisles.
If you need to apply for a library card or arrange for a ride home, please do so at this time.
Plus, if we space
The
these
library
out,
closes at
we'll
9 o'clock.
probably lose an aisle here if we get proper spacing. So we've lost a lot of room in the mezzanine. Another issue is the different levels that we have in the library. We've done a library where we've converted a middle school in Michigan that had 17 different levels, but we gutted it and made it just 2 different levels, and it was accessible all the way through. What you have is in the basement, going to the employee lounge and kitchen, you've got stairs going up there with really no way for an employee who might happen to be in a wheelchair to get to the lounge. In the auditorium, there's really no way for any presenter in a wheelchair to get up to the stage. And then just outside the door here, we've got 2 feet of drop into the mezzanine area. So there's really no way for a person in a wheelchair to come out that elevator and get a book in the mezzanine. So those are really our 3 big hurdles with regards to level changes. And the lower level we can handle. This diagram just indicates that the steepest pitch ramp that we can have, an ADA accessible ramp, is 1 in 12. So you can go up 1 foot for every 12 feet of run. So let's just say that these stairs are 6 inches, and we have 2 risers. So that's going up a foot. So we need a 12-foot ramp at that point, and then all the hand railings that go along with it. This is about 2 feet of difference. And the floor slopes down, or steps down, so essentially I haven't figured out what the slope would be, but we would need at least a 24-foot ramp at that point to get from the entrance to the stage. And I have that further called out, I think, in the next slide. And again, this is about 2 feet, so we need a 24-foot ramp to get to the mezzanine area. Now what that does, in fact, this is the mezzanine area. We're in the meeting room here, that's the elevator, and that's the stair to the books. We could put a ramp here, where you would come in here, switch back, and then come back down. And that would get us down. And that would be essentially the diagram of the size of the ramp that you would need. The problem with that is, if you build it there, you're lowering the headroom below that. Right? The other option is to put the ramp here. So you would put a floor where the stair is right now, but this is about 7'9" headroom right now, and this is a 2-foot difference. So the headroom that you would have is about 5'9". So what you would have to do is to take out the roof and build a higher roof over this ramp to get down to that collection, that part of the collection.
Would you have to take out asbestos to do that?
You wouldn't. Neither of those are terrific silver bullet kind of ways of doing things. And here you can see the ceiling in the higher area. So this ceiling is where we are right now. This is the ceiling of the mezzanine. So we would be dropping this ceiling down to that level. It's still within code. The ceiling height is within code. It's substandard, I think, for ceiling height. Not very well at your circulation test. If we go to the auditorium when we talk ramps, one of the initial concepts of the ADA was to treat people with disabilities like first-class citizens, not taking them through the back door to get to where everybody else is going through the front door, right? So with that tenet in mind, we can do two things. We can bring them through the back door, which is taking them from the outside door, taking a ramp right to the stage. But what that does is it really gets rid of the depth of your stage. Or we can put a ramp in from the entry here all the way to the stage there. And I think that might be the best solution. We can put seating along there, because one of the other issues is requirement for seating in a wheelchair. It's called companion seating. And that right now, there's no way of seeing it here, but the area that you have designated for wheelchair, it's only wide enough for one wheelchair. You really can't turn the wheelchair to look at the whole performance. You're looking sort of this way, and you have to turn that way to watch the performance. So what we would do is to create an area where you can have companion seating along that ramp area. And again, that's going to knock out a little bit of the usable square footage of that auditorium. Handrails. Right now it says that the handrail has to extend past the top step as well as beyond the bottom of the steps. I would venture a guess that in 100% of the stairs that you have, they stop at the last step, at best. In the mezzanine, they stop before the last step. Okay, toilets and bathrooms. Do we have all night? Can I? No. Okay. Let me just say it's a complex problem. The ADA makes bathrooms very big, and there are certain ways of approaching a stall that will allow you to get a smaller stall. So in plan, the ADA toilet stall is typically bigger. You can make it smaller in a renovation, but you have to have a 42-inch minimum path to that door. I don't think we have that. Again, I'm going to have to go back in if you want a more defined report. We're going to have to go back in and really measure everything. The other thing is that the toilet paper here, you can see the toilet paper holder is above the grab bar here. It's supposed to be below the grab bar. When you put it above the grab bar and when you put other things on it, it really makes it impossible for someone to lift themselves using the grab bar, and that's the intent of it. Same thing with the sink. The magic number here is 34 inches because you can reach the controls at the back with a roll up. There's a side reach, which basically puts you perpendicular or parallel to a counter, or you can roll up and be perpendicular to the counter. but the 34 inches, I'm sure every sink in this facility is at 36 inches. There's also clear space in front of the sink, and I think that we probably don't have that 30 inches in front of each sink. And there you can see the side roll-up with the controls, 24 inches, but again, the magic number here is 36 inches, and that I'm sure is, or I'm sorry, the magic number here is 34 inches, and I'm sure that's 36 inches. There are also height issues, where when you have things, head height issues, 80 inches, that beam is 79 inches. 80 inches, by the way, is 6'8", which is the height of a door. So this beam is an inch lower than a door. This is much lower. I think one of the easy fixes might be just to pull that out a little bit further so that it's in front of that pipe and you don't have these parallel walking issues. So, I mean, we can get into little nitty-gritty things like doorknobs. Those aren't allowed anymore. You have a lever instead of a doorknob because there's people with gripping issues. So you can, and in fact, it's the older population is having a issue with twisting and turning doorknobs. So if you have a lever that comes out, and I think there are a few of them in the facility. In fact, I think they're mostly on the bathroom doors, where you can just use the weight of your hand to push down the lever to activate the door. It's much easier. There's also an issue with doors, and that's just right out here, where you don't have enough space on the side of the door for somebody in a wheelchair to actually roll up and get out of the way of the door and back up. When this door to the children's area, or to the children's room is open, it blocks the aisle to these books here, so you only have about a foot in between there. These are all, so I've compiled, I think the low-hanging fruit is what I've been talking about. Everything that I could see in the images, everything that I could remember walking through the building, I just showed you on those slides. So these three slides are a compilation slide of everything that I think it is at issue with the ADA. There are stairs here. There are stairs into this bathroom, the employee bathroom. The bathroom here, much too small. Again, there's the door issue and the head height issue here. On the first floor, of course, there's the issue of getting from the sidewalk to the front door. All these indicate bathroom or sink, any sort of plumbing issue. And I forgot one probably there. The ramp, the seating, wheelchair seating here, the ramp to the stage is an issue. The stacks. We saw on an image at the teens area where the TV was just out there. There was a tripping hazard with the cord. If anybody knocked the TV down, that would be a hazard as well. So I think I put that oval just for that instance. And then up in the mezzanine, the bathroom that is right off here is a little challenged as well. You've got handrail issues, you've got a head height issue here, you have door issues on those two rooms. Of course, the ramps, and then the stacks. So, in the report, I'm almost done, bear with me. In the report, George Lawson, the library consultant that we hired to do the space needs analysis, came up with this space needs that said, that took a look at the different libraries of your size in the community, interviewed a number of people, staff, patrons, asked people what they liked about the building, what they didn't like, what they thought was lacking. used a variety of standards, library standards that he uses to come up with building programs and space needs. And he came up with this space needs analysis that says in 2010, if we were building a new library, that library would be 43 to 46,000 square feet. Our library today is 31,000 square feet. And it's not a very efficient 31,000 at that because of the different structure, especially in the lower level and the mezzanine. The structure really inhibits any sort of flexibility that a normal 31,000 square foot building would have. So if we were building a new library in 2010, our library today is about 12 to 14,000 square feet too small. To stay in this building will cost money, and again, in going through the images, the roof is 20 years old. All the mechanicals are 18 years old. The lighting has issues, not only with the number of lumens, but also the controllability. The electrical, we need a lot more to be a modern library, as well as data. So we put together this a year ago. We put together this maintenance option, which says that we do selective demolition. We fix the exterior. There's some cracks. There's caulking that needs to be done.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be
like
closing in 15 minutes. Please bring all library materials to the circulation desk
roof
for checkout
replacement,
and
interior
finish any
construction,
computer printing or photocopying at this time.
construction,
The library closes at 9 o'clock.
I think that the best option for us would be to make the bathrooms right outside reference ADA accessible. What that would mean, though, would be getting rid of one toilet each and making it have just one stall and one sink, so that they would be family-friendly bathrooms, but you're losing quantities of fixtures. Again, different plumbing issues. HVAC, that's a big one. Majority, and not all, but I would say 95% of the mechanical units are at their life expectancy right now. And there's very little redundancy in the building. In fact, the generator is 48 years old. I think it's World War II surplus. Yeah. Okay. Fire protection, because we're going to have, if we do any sort of remodeling, we're going to have to touch the fire protection, so we put in electrical. It would be great if we could get more power and data to the patrons. So we subtotaled that, and then added a price for escalation, a contingency, because we really haven't designed anything. These are just numbers that we're putting to a variety of things that we would like to do. Furnishings. One of the great things about this library is that it's used, and to prove it, the furnishings are pretty well used. So we put a number in to put all new furnishings in the library here, and that's the $458,000. New equipment, both for the staff and the patrons, fees, things like that. And that's how we came up with the $4.1 million. I think that's it. Any questions?
What about asbestos?
Asbestos we did not include, remediation we did not include.
Don't you have to do that?
You would. And at this point, we didn't know because we didn't ask how much asbestos is actually in the building. So I think that's
We have a report. We have a report that covers it.
Is there a lot of asbestos in the building? The ceiling in the main area is asbestos. The floor tiles on the main floor also contain asbestos. In both cases, they're sealed such that we were able to use the space. But if we were to do any repair, even temporary repairs, we would have to close the building during the time of the repair, mask off that area, put it in a negative pressure situation, and then have the air inside the building tested and the air coming out of the building tested on an hourly basis. We had to do that when we remodeled these adult workrooms.
So that's a separate cost completely.
Right, plus we would have downtime if we were to, just for an example, if we were to touch any of the asbestos in the mezzanine for a ramp, we would end up at least closing the whole mezzanine because that's the smallest area that we could seal off, which means we would have to remove all the books from that area as well.
Am I correct in understanding that this building currently is ADA compliant?
Yes, it is compliant because it's compliant within the code that it was initially built in. So, and in fact, let me back up because I don't think I made this clear. To be ADA compliant with the Illinois Accessibility Code, you don't have to do everything that I just outlined. I was showing everything that I found to be non-compliant, but to be compliant, you need to be able to get to the front door in a compliant manner. You need to be able to be accessible within the building to the exits. Okay? You need one accessible toilet per sex. And after that, it's pretty minimal what you should do. I think, though, that when you have a 30-year collection in a non-accessible space, it may cause problems with ADA advocates, plus it doesn't send a good message to patrons.
I have two more questions.
Sure.
Does it affect the grandfather clause at all to remediate these problems in a piecemeal manner as the budget allows?
It gives a 30-month cap. Well, again, nothing's quite clear. We're going to have to talk to the code official, the local code official. Most people do an addition or they do a renovation, and once you do that, it triggers, you have to do some ADA stuff, right?
I talked to Mr. Hildebrand from our village,
Okay.
our code person,
Right.
and he said that if it affects less than 15% of the structure, it's not a problem.
Right, right. There's a dollar amount, there's a percentage amount. Yes, and most of it, but getting back to the point where most people do a renovation, and because they do a renovation, then they have to bring certain things up to ADA standards. You're not really doing a renovation, you're bringing things up to ADA standards
Right.
as your renovation.
My second question is, was it ever explored whether we could have a ramp, not a ramp, a lift going off of this level right here, so that we weren't taking running ramp space, just a lift, like we have in our church. It's a roll-on lift down and off, and there's nothing, there doesn't appear, I'm not a structural person, though,
Right.
there doesn't appear to be any impediment to doing that. Was that ever looked at?
No, it wasn't. I think we'd have to make that stairway wider to get that in. And I know.
Similar structural issues to one of the ramps, it would be affecting less area. And then you have to look at the operations of the lift. Highland Park is an example of a library that uses lifts to overcome some of the internal level changes. And it meets the accessibility requirement. It's a lot of maintenance for them. They just got a bill for $8,000 to make it work again, and that's a pretty recurring thing. So
it has to be inspected yearly as well. And I know some code officials just frown on that. They don't like that.
But it is a possibility.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Are all ADA issues unfunded mandates?
Yes.
Just give you guys some background on this. The board at the time, before Amber Anderson was hired, interviewed 4 or 5 different architectural firms to question them on, they made a presentation on their scope of the report, their experience, and of course their price. And we went through this for months before we decided on these guys because of their experience in libraries in general and just their personalities and the price. And this has nothing to do with, they have not drawn up plans for a new library. There are no plans anywhere for a new library. They're part of their proposal included three different site cost analysis, just so the board had something to compare what a $4 million rehab to this building would get us what building up at the time was vacant, the drive-through bank on Dempster Street next to Hart Park, to see if that was at all feasible for a library the size that we were hoping for. And Site B, which is the old domicile furniture site, which is also available and owned by the village. So there are criteria that the board, kept in mind through all of this about not having any taxable properties, taken off the tax rolls ever, to just try to blend the library into a neighborhood or put it where it'd be accessible to more people, things like that. And of course, it'd be in Morton Grove and be available. But at that moment, those were the three sites. The site we're sitting on, Site B, and then the drive-through bank. So just for cost comparisons, they drew up site plans for those with the figures that we were talking about. The size of the collection, how many parking spaces needed, and such. That is as far as the plans for a library have ever gone. There are no detailed plans, there are no three-dimensional models of anything. The board was not pushing a specific plan. So, just so you know that. They are not hired as our architects. If we ever decided to build, renovate, remodel, or anything, we would go through the whole process again of interviewing as many architects as we felt needed until we found the one that suited our needs to do anything. Is that correct? I mean, you.
Sadly, yes.
Yes. Yes.
One thing that has
Mr.
not
Huffman,
been.
I don't know if I should be addressing this question to you or to you, sir, but we are aware of that it was drawn up at least to where this collection would be, where that collection would be for L1, L2, D1, F1, and the F2
Yes,
plan.
those are just vague spaces because for the adult collection, you would need
Right.
so many square feet.
The question that I have is, we have many copies of this plan, and this is the plan that you, and in looking through the plan, in every single copy that we have, we're missing page 32.
Was it?
And 32 would have contained, I can show you, 32 would have contained the option for L3. Why was L3 not put out?
The board at the time, I forgot what L3 was not.
L3 is this.
We never did a plan for it. We did a,
Actually, it's in, sir, can I direct you
Sure.
to, on page 47, there is a listing of L3 and the cost.
no, I know, but we never did a drawing for it.
Correct, but there's not a page here delineating. There was a page, at some point, there was a page 32.
Well, L3
It
would be,
skips-
that would be exactly what is sitting here now with just some
What
physical
I'm saying
changes
is,
to.
there was a physical page 32, and that physical page would have contained the information on L3, which is the renovation of this library. I'm wondering where that page was lost. Was it lost with you, sir, or was it
I
lost
think it was
with the
lost with
board?
me, because my image goes from 31 to 33, and I
And
think
where
when we,
was then,
well, I think what we did was when we didn't have anything on this page, we didn't put a page number to it, but we started with the next page. So if you look, I believe there might be a few pages that are blank.
I went through and counted all the pages.
Okay.
And the only one that isn't accounted for is page 32.
Well, I can tell you,
Unnumbered.
we wanted to stop at that point and start with the D scheme at this point, so you could have this page which describes these drawings and not have to flip back and forth. So there was never a drawing
In
on
showing all
page
the
32.
possibilities for the public, would it not maybe have been a good idea to put in the other option of maintaining and renovating the building when the presentation that we saw tonight was a subset of the presentation, except for the ADA, of the presentation that was presented on May 13th, 2010? Would that not have been a useful possibility to show the people in Morton Grove in order to give them all the options that they have for optimizing their library services?
Well, I think the only way I can answer that is Dan described the options that we did actually come up with a form to. We had to test the program that the library programmer came up with, the amount of books, things like that. And then the contractor, Mortensen, who did all the numbers for us, needed to know the complexity of the building that we were talking about. So in that instance, we drew up these shapes that we thought could hold the amount of books, staff, whatever, see how they worked within the site themselves. And it gave Mortensen Construction something to price to, right? Since we weren't coming up with any new shapes, and since we were vague with the other ones, we didn't feel that we needed to, I guess, present a new plan of this building.
Wouldn't there have to be some kind of plan to come up with those numbers that you are arriving at there?
We
For
talked,
the board to aim at a $4.1 million?
yeah, we talked through it with the construction company. We
But
never
there
drew up
had to
a
be a
plan.
criteria, right, saying we need this much change in electrical, this much change in HVAC, this much
Yes.
change in, and might it have been a good option to present that option along with all the other options that were given at the time?
It's an MEP narrative.
Yeah, there's a narrative in the back that, so it assesses all the electrical, all the mechanical, and
May I
essentially
have your
says,
attention, please?
well,
It is
this
9
is all
o'clock
needs to be
and the
replaced.
library is
So,
now closed. You must check out all
so
materials
they've
at this
taken
time.
that narrative
The library will reopen
with the
tomorrow at 9
understanding
o'clock.
of the
Thank
existing
you and have a
mechanical,
pleasant
electrical,
evening.
plumbing, and put numbers to that. We have in-house put numbers to the furnishings, to the interior construction, things like that. The roof, they know the square footage of, so they were able to put numbers to that. So there wasn't a whole lot of drawing that needed to go on to understand what needed to happen to this building.
And some of those numbers should have been on the replacement schedule anyway, because there's no surprise that the roof is structural or the age of the HVAC units.
But again, it's in the report.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Can I interject one thing? The size of our collection that the building currently holds is too small. Every time a new book comes out, we have to take a book off the shelves and put it away, not to be shown to the public. It's not only books, I mean, it's all the other things that happen in the library. At present, we just don't have enough room.
Right.
Way understand.
That's already been a conversation for a later date, but I think, any other questions for Tom? To your understanding, you guys have seen the cost comparisons for other sites and stuff, so you just know what's coming up. And as far as knowing when an air conditioner is gonna die or a furnace is gonna die, there are no documentation that goes back to the 1960s saying when these things were put in or repaired or whatever. At least I've never seen. And Ben has been employed here for how long?
5.5 years.
5 years. And Art and I have not been on the board that long. This is why this report was done,
Right.
is to get us all up to snuff. We know what is coming now.
I've
Before
assumed we've
that,
been
it-
saving for these things all along.
There are laws that strictly prohibit the saving of money or budgeting or levying for money just to pad your savings account. We started a special reserve fund in 2009, was it? That is a way that the government, the state of Illinois set up that we could put unspent monies from the budget away later. There are laws that strictly govern it. So that's what the board and the library has been obeying for the past 75 years. And now it's up to us to move on from today on. Hi, Tom, thank you.
sure. Thank you.
And if they clear out, we'll open up the public comments, which we have not had yet. And then get into the committee reports and get rid of the new business we have to still finish before.